Good morning, and on behalf of the Department of Transportation, I want to thank you for inviting us here to discuss how we're addressing our electronic records management challenges, or as Dr. Tom Brown at NARA used to say, opportunities for success. Fair warning, I, like many of you, am an IT person and I speak fluent acronym. When I saw the program for today, I had to laugh at myself a little bit. You all got bookended by Beauty and the Beast today. You had Lisa Haralampus from NARA this morning, obviously the beauty in this analogy. Now you have me and Fluffy at the end. I'll let you decide whether it's Fluffy or me that's the beast. So knowing how DOT is organized helps folks understand our approach a little better. I'm the director of the Department's Records Management Office. My office is responsible for policy and oversight. Operationally, I think scheduling and effecting disposition is done at the operating administration level or the OA level or the modal level. When we talk about the modal level, we're thinking transportation like trucks, cars, railroads, airlines, of course. The operational end of things is not under my supervision, an important distinction, I think. We follow a risk-based, risk-balanced approach to everything, including the RM and ERM. Our work on M1921 is really nothing more than a continuation of our efforts to meet M1218, which of course has gone the way of the dodo bird. So now you ask, what does a three-headed dog have to do with this? Before M19 came out, we had already reached the conclusion that email databases and documents were each going to have unique functional requirements and that a one-size-fits-all just wasn't going to work in the DOT environment. Add to that the fact that the programs in each OA are each expected to manage their respective records according to NARA and departmental policy, and we see that getting any merging of resources across those programs to support a separate RM-ERM program wasn't going to work and didn't pass the LAF test here. A little over 2 years ago, the department started up a small effort called Destinations Digital. And if you know what I'm talking about from the DOT, you know that small is really a tongue-in-cheek euphemism there. One of the central tenets of this effort is the idea of bringing commodity IT under one DOT banner. The idea that an economy of scale for shared services like infrastructure, licensing, security, and what I call the common enterprise-wide solutions like email could be better provided as a one-stop shop and also be brought in at a cheaper cost point. So Fluffy and the email head. Quite simply, DOT is following the NARA-endorsed capstone approach and utilizing GRS 6.1. While this approach is a role-based model, we're looking into moving towards a content-based model in the future. Capstone is an easy concept, but difficult to manage with manual processes and triggers for events-based use cases. Nice thing about this audience is I can use the term like use case and you understand what I'm talking about. Not always having that kind of luck. Fluffy's other second head. Electronic information systems or databases. These are your Oracle, SQL Server types of databases. This is the fun one of the heads and plays into one of the other D2 efforts. D2 is the acronym for Destinations Digital that I've been leading. More on that in just a second. From my experience and my opinion, one of the most important artifacts of a software development effort is the requirement specification or requirements traceability matrix. This is going to help you organize your development activities and the order for development and delivery of the products. Of particular interest is that the requirement spec lets the program define mandatory and highly desirable requirements. So for DOT, we're actually baking into the SDLC, the IT spend, the CIPIC process, the idea of mandatory requirements to meet electronic records management. Being able to defer the build and deployment of those modules is part of the key features of that. The requirements get documented and memorialized in the spec, and most importantly, the program gets to go forward into production, not have a dependency on a NARA schedule getting signed off before they go into production. We all know how long it can take for NARA to do a schedule and get it back and approve it for you. Now at DOT, we have also taken that a further step. You may recall my mentioning another D2 effort that I was leading. That effort delivered a multiple award BPA for department-wide software development and software maintenance support. It's a task order-driven contract, and each effort will have built into it subtasks that support the development, test, and deployment of ERM retention and disposition use cases, as well as another task for production execution of those use cases. These ERM-related subtasks are expected to be optional, with the added benefit of cost estimates being done by the vendors so that the program can begin budget and IT spend planning to meet the program's requirements for electronic records management. Okay, Fluffy's third and final head, artifacts. These are the COTS-based artifacts like PowerPoint, spreadsheet documents, Microsoft Word, and if you're as old as I am, you may even remember WordStar. They're stored in your network drives, SharePoint, and other repositories throughout the organization. They support business processes that have been in place for many years. For DOT and the M1921 efforts, we are leveraging the investments already made in these native repositories. NARA calls this managing in place. To us at DOT, this just seemed easier and simpler and didn't require us to bring in a new COTS product, or worse, build something, and then try and do an enterprise-wide business process re-engineering. Now you say to yourself, those products don't do retention and disposition automatically. I agree. For now, it requires a fair amount of manual and brute force effort to implement retention disposition rules. That being said, you might remember me mentioning earlier that we are seeing a good return on investment on the DOT economy of scale pricing getting lowered. We're seeing the same thing with the vendors now building in these retention and disposition rules into their products. For instance, in January, a company called Unison deployed retention disposition capabilities into their product. This is a department-wide acquisition tool called Prism. With the combined support from the senior procurement executive and the CIO, we were able to convince the vendor that implementing retention disposition features into Prism, the department would gain additional functionality and greater control of the acquisition-related artifacts, will allow the department to transition to an all-electronic procurement process and meet the M1921 directive at the same time. The reality is that we were working with the firm prior to M19 coming out, but gave a little more oomph to the request when M19 came out and said, hey, we can kill two birds with one stone. In addition to vendors building into their products the ERM capabilities, we're also seeing machine learning and AI tools coming to the marketplace that can also support ERM. This will reduce, if not eliminate, manual processes we are having to undertake now. In other words, let the system do the work for you. After all, these are repeatable processes that follow rule sets and can be automated, which brings me back to Dr. Brown. As you know, I'm a techie and my degrees are in computer science. Dr. Brown once told me just after I'd started working at NARA, yes, I'm a former Narnian, that it was my ilk that caused this problem. I looked back across his desk at him and said without batting an eye, that's okay, we'll fix you anyway, because that's what IT people do as part of their analysis. Okay, big finish. I know I'm running close on time. At DOT, risk is balanced by enabling programs to recognize requirements and to prioritize those requirements to best meet the agency's needs. That's not to say retention and disposition isn't going to happen. It lets the program prioritize its funded and what some people call unfunded mandates. The risk of keeping records longer than required is accepted by the program, and that the associated cost of maintaining access to those records is also something the program will bear. So we started this whole thing off with how do you train your dragon? Oh, sorry, my mistake, wrong movie. We started with how do you manage a three-headed monster? You grab it by the tail, but hold on, it's going to be a bumpy ride. Again, on behalf of DOT, I want to thank you for inviting us. Stay safe out there. We are DOT, and safety is what we do. And I believe we have some time for some questions now.
I think we do. Thank you, sir. I appreciate that very much. Give me 1 second. I'm making sure that that I'm not missing ones that are coming in here at the last moment. So stand by for just 1 sec. And so one question that that was asked, and it was applying to you and to other speakers, is sorry, just one moment. I'm getting my different lists confused all at the same time. Was about sort of overall sponsorship of the initiative, and since the memo, the M1921 memo came out, has the overall sponsorship of the initiative changed? And we've gotten variations of this question throughout the day about leadership buy-in and making sure this works. But has the memo itself changed the conversation and changed the stakeholders who are involved in moving it forward?
No, in fact, I think M19 actually gave them maybe a little something to point to and lean on, because up until then, with the Destinations Digital effort, they hadn't really thought to they hadn't thought about wanting to have a department-wide electronic records management system in that sense. And they're still not. But the idea of having the software development, software maintenance efforts support records management at the same time fell very nicely into place. And when they saw that, they've been very pleased with how we have it planned out at this point.
And another question about implementation and managing this effort is, how important is it to create an agency dashboard to track the progress? And then a related question about the role of still allowing records in place storage at the Department of Transportation. So let's take the dashboard question first, if we could.
So at the moment, we haven't really looked at a dashboard because of the way we're implementing this using the native repositories, leveraging the existing investments that way. Each of them would have its own dashboard from a project management standpoint going forward in terms of the quad charts or whatever you want to look at those things as during those periodic reviews of the project as it goes forward, in particular for the software engineering types of work. For the COTS products and things of that nature, I don't know that there'd necessarily be a dashboard there unless we were able to get a better analysis of what we've got out there already. We've been in the process of migrating everybody to Office 365 in the cloud. And that's been one project that we've got going that, of course, is leveraging the existing SharePoint instances that way. But I'm not sure where we would really put dashboards in place that are outside of all the already project management dashboards we have.
And any sort of a high-level perspective you could offer on in-place storage for records at your department?
I guess I need a little more context for what that question's about. I mean, it's one of those where I can say, I'll put it this way. At the Patent and Trademark Office, when I was there 20 years ago, they had bought a COTS product, and the COTS product was going to replicate every electronic case file that the Patent Office had. And when we did the analysis of how much storage that was going to be, they basically looked at me and said, "You're not getting $10 billion for storage. You're going to have to come up with another approach." And there I defined what I called a metadata management kind of mapping pointer approach to doing electronic records management with artifacts staying in their native repositories, and we built a metadata management tool that does that mapping. That's what was talked about with a part of D2, was doing these sort of metadata management types of tasking that way and utilizing the existing repositories that way, as opposed to trying to buy something that replicates either replicates the records in a behind-the-scenes manner from an end-user standpoint, or you're trying to do a BPR that has the end user getting frustrated because it's not the way they've done business for decades.
Thank you for that. And then one question I want to read verbatim, which is talking about how NARA has published digitization and validation standards for temporary records. Has your agency developed its own validation and quality control standards for digitized records, or are you making use of third-party processes to validate that the digitized records comply with 1236.32?
What we've done is create a tool that helps us do a cost-benefit analysis to even decide if digitization is required or worth the investment for a particular program. If it comes back that the return on investment makes it a reasonable return for them to be able to digitize their corpus of paper, then we would follow the NARA guidance and set up the quality assurance and controls based upon that, coming out of the temporary records that way. The issue isn't so much the physical scanning and what the technical specs are for how to scan things in, whether it's DPI or whatever like that. The issue, as you've talked about or mentioned, was the quality assurance, the QA, QC that's on the back end. And that's human intensive. You have to decide what level of loss you might want to be able to accept on temporary records. And if you're going to say we're going to have 0% loss, somebody's sitting there staring at a lot of paper going through and being imaged and making sure that the images are in fact identical to what was on the paper. And I haven't seen NARA's specifications for the permanent records. I know they were coming out. I thought they were coming out last year. We're hoping to see them sometime this year, so we can start seeing and doing these cost estimates, because it could be quite prohibitive to retroactively go back and capture paper into a digital world.
Very good. And what I think is the last question of the morning is, Lisa mentioned earlier that while obviously the coronavirus shutdowns are causing changes to everything right now, and there may well be delays in certain milestones, for now the deadlines stand. How do you feel about your department's progress to date on the electronic records transformation, and do you feel like you're still on a path to compliance with these deadlines?
So I feel like we're on a path to compliance. I would caution anybody about what they think they're going to have as 100% compliance at this point, simply because, as I said earlier, we do a risk-balanced approach, and what does the agency have to do now versus what does the agency have to do tomorrow? A lot of those deadlines came out with very little time to be able to put them into any kind of future budgets for agencies on some of that stuff. So that's going to have to be worked out and worked into.
Okay. Well, and I think we are going to need to leave it there. So, Walter, thank you very much for your presentation today, and for being with us through a good chunk of the morning. We appreciate your participation and your insights.